All right, we are live. Let me just see. I am definitely live. All right. Good evening, Corona Days Professional Development Group. It's me, Danette Edwards. So this evening, I'm here with JaKela Walker, and she's going to present to us Dare to Dream, strategies to help you create the change you seek. Tonight, JaKela is going to help us learn more tips and tricks and tools that we can use to help navigate our career. She'll teach us how to reframe our limiting beliefs and lean into discomfort. She'll also review how we can continue building our skill sets to help find future success. A little about JaKela. JaKela is the senior finance director of special projects for DSM. She leads a global team that is responsible for designing and implementing standardized, simplified, and harmonized accounting to reporting processes, as well as a master data governance approach. She has nearly 20 years of diverse experience, with the last six in various roles at DSM. Before joining DSM, she's held positions of increasing levels of responsibility across multiple disciplines, including audit, finance, and accounting, sales, and human resources in banking, pharma, and medical device companies. JaKela earned a Bachelor of Business Administration and International Business with a concentration in finance from Howard University, and has also completed executive training at the Institute for Management Development. All right, so I am going to, guys, this can be an interactive presentation tonight. So if you have questions, thank you all for joining. I see there are people who are already on the broadcast with us. Thank you. You can give us your questions in the chat, and I will get them to JaKela if they don't come across during her presentation. And so I'm going to remove myself and turn this over to you. If there's anything else you'd like to tell us about yourself that I may have left out or messed up in that bio read, go ahead and do it.
Look, do we do the three questions now or at the end?
No, we do three questions at the end.
Okay.
All right. I'll come back on at the end. All right.
Okay. So I want to make sure that this is as interactive as possible. And while I do have some prepared slides and can talk from those slides, I can also talk on the fly. So as we go through this content today, if you have some questions or concerns, please feel free to share them, because I think that will make it easier to make sure that what I'm saying is useful for you. And so I am sharing my screen. As soon as you can see it, let me know. It's working on it. Well, it's swirling. Swirling is not good. Well, while I'm waiting on the stream to share or to be able to share with you, what I want to talk a little bit about. So I'll give you a little bit of background about me, and then I'll share with you kind of a moment of pause and reflection as you're starting to think about a pivot, a change, and just how do you approach career opportunities or job opportunities. So we'll call that section career decisions, and then I'll move into how do you lean into the discomfort. So we all come to that point where things may not be as easy or simple as we'd like for it to be, and so it becomes a challenge. And then last but not least, how continuous learning can be helpful from a career perspective. I am still getting a swirly. And Danette, can you confirm that you can still see me or hear me? I'm back. Can you hear me? I can see it in the chat that you can. So I'm going to try this one more time with this screen share. I think now you can see it, correct? There we go. So let me give you a little bit of background about me. For those of you who are listening, trying to figure out where I'm from, I'm a Midwestern girl. So I was raised in Kansas City, but I'm actually from Nashville. But I've been here on the East Coast for quite some time. This time around, about 7 years. But I've also had a few international stops. And so I'll take it a step back. Before I moved into this career of finance, I started off by studying biochemistry, loved it. But after about the third semester, I realized I did not want to be a neonatologist. That was no longer my dream. But I had a lot of scholarship money tied into STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math. So I finished the biochemistry requirements and then moved into international finance. Loved it, loved languages, loved people, but really loved the quantitative portions around finance, accounting, and how it all worked from an international perspective. While I was in university, I first did an exchange program in Costa Rica, so spent a summer in Costa Rica, and then actually spent an academic year in Spain. And I realized I didn't even put it on this slide. I really was not. I should have. I'm a graduate from Howard University, and I'm sitting here smiling internally because for the last several weeks I've made sure that in every call at work to remind them that Howard University is producing legacies, particularly with this last inauguration with Kamala Harris, who is also a Howard University graduate. So that's a little bit about me from a background perspective, where I'm from, what I studied. So then I'll talk a little bit more about just career. So I started in investment banking. Thought that was going to be what I did for the entirety of my career, because I really enjoyed the fast pace. I loved Manhattan, but I realized pretty quickly that from a work-life balance, fit, blend, whichever word you want to use there, that was not going to work well for me. But here's what I learned. First of all, I figured out how to analyze things that did not even look like they should be related. And that skill has really served me well throughout the rest of my career. I've had to figure out pretty quickly how to work with people across all levels, and not just work with them, but to get information from them, to give them information, and to leverage their networks, their experience to help me to be successful. But what I didn't like when I worked there is I didn't like the person that I felt like I had to be to achieve success. It was a hyper competitive environment, and I just didn't like that. I'm very collaborative naturally, but I didn't feel like that was really the road to success there. It was definitely put on paper, but that wasn't what was happening in real life. The other thing that I, in that role in particular, is I spent a lot of time doing analysis of global companies and meeting with people across the globe. So I knew that whatever I did after that needed to be something that was international in scope and span. And so that led me to my next experience in pharma. So I left banking, left Manhattan, and moved to back to the Midwest. And in that particular experience, so I was there for about a decade in the pharma company. And this is where I had to learn to get comfortable in new environments. So when I moved to the Midwest, so it was a brand new city. And while I knew the region, Midwest is, not all Midwestern cities are built the same. So getting comfortable in that environment, getting comfortable with things that I had not yet done previously. For the 10 years or so that I worked for that company, I worked for them in DC, in Puerto Rico, in Japan, and then from a travel perspective, I spent for the first 3 years about 80% of my time not at home. So it was very imperative to get familiar. And then in terms of function, so by training, Finance is my field, but I also stepped out into sales and marketing and an HR role while I was in the pharma company. Gave me some pretty good insight in terms of what's the business model really, because what you put on paper and what happens in real life are not always the same. And then from an HR perspective, really understanding and getting to the heart of the matter as it relates to people. What does talent look like? How do we recruit, retain, attract talent? And how do we make sure we do that so that we can form an equitable playing field across an entire landscape? Those are skills that I continue to carry with me today. And as I said before, I was really looking for opportunities to have international span and scope. And so many of the roles that I had while in the pharma company, I definitely did that. And I really honed and began to understand the importance of effective cross-cultural communication. And so I'm walking through some of the experience because these are tools and skills that I've added and carried with me and built on them to help me be successful from a career perspective. So entrepreneurship. I left the pharma company I left at what I would consider to be the height of success because I decided that I was going to take a bet on me. I was very much intrigued by the dreams and possibilities, and this was around the time that the Affordable Care Act became legislation. So once it passed, and so I said, I'm going to take a bet on me and leverage skills that I've learned both in the banking environment, in this pharma company, and just in general. And so I opened up a small consulting practice to help small doctors' offices figure out how to survive in the new world after the Affordable Care Act. And it was a lot of fun. There's something very empowering about being your own boss, reporting to yourself. But I also realized I wasn't quite yet ready for all the adventures of entrepreneurship. I really like knowing how much my check is going to be and when it's going to be deposited into my account. And from an entrepreneurship perspective, that is not always guaranteed money. So I made a decision to go back into corporate and moved into the dental medical device field. Used a lot of the things that I'd learned before. So I knew a little bit about the industry from my banking days, but it was a new industry, it's a new business model. And I was moving back to the East Coast. But what I didn't recognize at the time is that from a work-life fit perspective, what I thought would be 25% travel actually was going back to 80% travel. 80% travel is a lot of fun, especially when you're in your early 20s and don't need sleep. I was past the early 20s period, and that 80% travel really became a challenge. So for the dental medical device company, I was only there for about 18 to 24 months before it was time for me personally to make a different decision. And in part, one, because the culture of that organization really didn't fit what I was looking for. There's an interesting story out right now about Shonda Rhimes, where she talked about not feeling valued in her organization and not staying somewhere you don't feel valued. And while my experience at that dental medical device company wasn't as overt as hers, I knew just based on how I felt that long term was not going to be a good fit because it wasn't the right culture. So I started the process of looking for a new role outside of that company. And then also from a personal perspective, I had started dating the man who's now my husband, and we lived about 100 miles apart. So once it got serious, we made a decision. Let's figure out how to do this differently. So I moved. I found a new job and I moved. And now I'm with a company called DSM. DSM is headquartered in the Netherlands, and our tagline is purpose-led, performance-driven. And our approach in terms of what we do and how we do is people, planet, profit. We don't do it if it harms people. We won't do it if it harms the planet. And only then, once we're sure that it doesn't have a negative impact on people and planet, then we start looking at profit. And for me, when you start thinking about that, because that really relates to sustainability, that was important to me from a company perspective. And so I've been with this company now for the last 6 years or so. And I'm currently in a role as a senior finance director of special projects. We are in the process of updating our ability to report from a financial perspective. But in order to do that, first we want to harmonize our processes, including the master data. And so today I have a team, there's about 60 of them spread across the world, here in the US, the Netherlands, India, Brazil, China, and Switzerland are where most of them are from. I also am a champion for inclusion, diversity, equity, and belonging. So I am also our North American Inclusion and Diversity Lead, so effectively our Chief Diversity Officer for this region. And for me, this was really important to leverage my position in this organization to really create a more equitable and fair playing field. I think we've all been touched by the events that happened last summer. But even before that, I think we all are invested in, let's figure out how to make the workplace and beyond more equitable and fair. And so in this particular role, I focus very much on how do we have conversations around equity? How do we build allies and accomplices in this journey? And how do we make sure that what we call inclusion and diversity isn't just working from a global level, but can work here within this region? And so I really enjoyed this role and have had the opportunity to create some new approaches to how this company is looking at inclusion and diversity. Prior to these roles, I was the Senior Finance Director and Controller for North America, and then also worked in our biomedical business. I'm going to pause there. This is an interesting setup because I can't see body language or faces, but I want to pause and see, are there questions before we move into the next part of this? Okay, so what I want to talk to you about next, and here's a saying from Will Rogers: even if you're on the right road, you'll get run over if you just sit there. So one of the things that I've really tried to take a step back and look at is from a career decision perspective, how do I make decisions? What are the things that need to be considered? And how do you order your steps? And so first and foremost is goal setting. A dream without a dream without a plan is just a wish. So the very first thing we need to do from a goal setting perspective is really think about what's important. What do you want to accomplish? How do you want to get it accomplished? And write it down. Because saying things but not really putting together the action steps or plans to get them accomplished is not helpful. But what can be helpful is setting these concrete goals. And it's important to make them measurable. So you want to make a SMART goal. First of all, be specific. What is it that you're trying to accomplish? The second part is make sure it's measurable. So saying that you want to do something is wonderful, but how will you know you've actually been able to achieve it if it's not measurable? So you want to make sure you have something that helps indicate whether or not it's actually being done. It needs to be achievable. It should be relevant, and it needs to be time bound. So those are SMART goals. And for me, typically I have the SMART goals for work, but then I also have personal SMART goals that I write down and hold myself accountable to. And I'll come to that in a little later. The next one is a SWOT analysis. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And I do this, we talk a lot about this from a business perspective, but I do this from a personal perspective. What are the things that I'm really good at? What are the things that I need a little help, a little coaching? What are some of the opportunities and what are the threats? So for example, one of the things that for me is a weakness or a development opportunity, I know that patience is something that I'm still working on. I am still working on patience, and that leads into communication style. I am naturally a very direct communicator. But what I've had to learn throughout my career is that you have to tailor communication uh, so that whoever you're talking to can receive the message that you're trying to deliver. That will always be part of my development areas or weaknesses, but I recognize it and try to keep it front of mind, especially when I'm tired or when I don't have the best relationship with the person or people that I'm trying to deliver a message to. But it's important to be realistic about what is your SWOT analysis. Because by being realistic about it, then you can create the right plan. So, part of those goals to really address it. The third thing on this chart, and it might seem interesting compared to the other things here, but it is as important, if not more than the rest, is energy. I am a big believer in listening to how you feel. How do the situations make you feel? How do the people around you make you feel? Energy is a driver. And so I talked about leaving the medical device company because I just didn't have the right feeling about the culture. And that was entirely about energy. We spend so much time at work that it's important to be to really be comfortable while you're there, because that if not, then you're spending a lot of energy because you're uncomfortable. So energy is important. Pay attention to it. um, Next up is networking. So networking, who you know will get you there, what you know can keep you there. So it's important to really meet people, figure out how best to build a genuine relationship. People don't care what you know until they know that you care. So really figure out from a networking perspective what you can add to the relationship, because then once you have established these genuine relationships, it'll help you from a career perspective as you go forward. Kind of the you help me, I help you. Feedback. Asking for feedback and then listening to it is really important from a development perspective. We all have blind spots. We all have things that we're working on. So that's related back to that SWOT. What's important is that you understand what those blind spots are and the development areas from not just your perspective, but for others. And it's also important to get feedback about the things that are going well. So I have a friend, she says she'll send a message in our group chat when she's not having a good day and she just needs us to love on her. That's part of feedback. So make sure that you have people that are willing to tell you the truth so that you can appropriately respond, react. And then last but not least is accountability. You can do all these things and have all these wonderful, great plans and initiatives, but sometimes you get overwhelmed or you have so many competing priorities that not everything gets done or doesn't get done in the way which you intended. So, accountability partners are absolutely helpful from a career decision perspective. And for me, I have more than one accountability partner. So another development area for me, and it's probably very much related to the direct communication style. I do not have a poker face. And so back when the world was open pre-COVID, um, when I would be in these face-to-face meetings, there would be people that I would tag and tell them, hey, if you see me squinting at someone, or if the tone isn't right, can you be my spotter? Can you hold me accountable? So give me that feedback, but also hold me accountable to the fact that I'm saying that I'm working on this. It's been really invaluable from a career perspective to have those people that can do that. But then also personally, same thing. I have friends that for various things, I'll say, I'm working on this. Can you help me with that? I think many people start the year off, new year, new me, and a weight loss or healthy living, etc., can be a goal. And then the how do you make sure you're doing that? So we have a group and we hold each other accountable to: did you eat right? Did you work out? Did you drink the water? Whatever it is that the goal is. So I see a question: can I still do these things late in my career? I finished school in 2005 and didn't do too much of this. It is never too late to start doing this. You can absolutely do these things now, and continue to build as you go. As we start thinking about the concept of career and working, we are living longer, so our careers are longer than they were in the past. And so, yes, absolutely start doing these things, so that it'll help you and can also help you tailor your next decisions from a job or career perspective. Great question. Any other questions on this slide before I move to the next one? All right. So we talked about reframing limited beliefs. I think oftentimes we ask the question, what's the worst that could happen? And maybe about 10 years or so ago, I stopped asking in that manner and changed it to what's the best that can happen? Because if you approach it from what's the best that can happen, then it gives you a different hope and a different confidence level. It may give you a different energy as you approach things that may be new or different for you. So let's talk about leaning into discomfort. What happened to make me reframe the question? So I was in, so remember I told you I took a step out into the world of entrepreneurship. And while it may not seem this way, I am an introvert by nature. I will have some of the best sleep tonight. I really appreciate you for giving me the opportunity to come and speak to you, but also to have the best sleep tonight, because these types of things take a lot of energy. Well, as you know, from an entrepreneur's perspective, typically as a startup, you are out there trying to find your next opportunity. You're meeting a lot of people you may not have met previously. You're taking a lot of risk. There's a lot of rejection. And so I had to reframe from what's the worst that can happen to what's the best that can happen. And then a couple of years later, what really solidified this as my new approach, my brother died. So he was about a year younger than I am, and we were in our early 30s. And it was in the middle of the night, I got a call that he had died, and it was unanticipated. And so one of the things that I still cherish about him and his approach was he was always so optimistic. Even when he probably shouldn't have been, he was. And so I think that I've continued to adopt that mantra, even when historically I would have not. And a big part of that is because it's part of how I carry on his legacy and his memory. So those two things in tandem and have really helped make this a habit, because once you start it, it can absolutely become a habit. Thank you for the question. Let me go back. So discomfort. And I talked a little bit about that in the role as the entrepreneur, but discomfort has been something that I've figured out how to get comfortable with from a career perspective all along, because it has given me these new visibility and opportunities that if I were only trying to stay in the comfort zone, I wouldn't be able to really advance and grow. So the first part of that is new experiences. So I started in banking. That was an absolute new experience as a person fresh from university. I moved to New York, and for people from the East Coast, it's not a big deal. Maybe it's not a big deal, but for me, as this girl from Kansas City by way of Nashville, who had done some schooling in DC, it was a big deal to be able to tell people from home, girl, I'm moving to New York. But just really having that experience. And then when I moved into pharma, internal audit, where I was traveling around the world into new countries where maybe I spoke the language, maybe I didn't. Maybe I knew people, maybe I didn't. But really figuring out how to be okay with me. And then moving from that experience into a sales experience. Again, it was a very different experience than the one that I had been trained for. And then into HR, hadn't been trained for that, but really figuring out and tapping into inner confidence, but also by that point into career mentors to help. But each of the experiences that I've had really, it, again, is part of that toolbox collection, and helped me step out of my comfort zone. And if you look, it's like outside of your comfort zone is where the magic happens. And I 100% agree with that. See the question of, did I feel adequately prepared for professional work when I finished undergrad, and did I get self-directed professional development? For the second question, if whomever asked it, if you can clarify what you mean for that, because I don't know if I fully understand. But for that first question, I had done several internships, and so I thought I was prepared for professional work when I finished undergrad. But what I learned very quickly is that there are the written rules and the unwritten rules of any company culture and in any job. And that part I didn't really understand, office politics and those types of things. And I shared earlier that one of the big challenges that I had in that environment was I didn't like the person I felt like I had to be. And so, no, I really, it took a while for me to kind of get into my groove. Probably those first 90 days was more than anything trying to feel prepared or get prepared, and not look stupid in the process. So imposter syndrome, I think many of us have heard of that. It was real. I questioned myself on a regular basis, but the fake it till you make it was also real to help me get through that process. And professional development outside of work, I was fortunate in that in all of the companies that I worked in, they had strong learning and development programs internally, and they also supported development outside of work. So I attended lots of conferences, conventions. I had a career coach at one point in time. And then again, using the internal learning and development platforms, particularly early in my career, that helped for me to really come up the learning curve quickly. From a mentor perspective, again, from many of the companies that I've worked for, they had formal mentoring programs. But the other place where I have found mentors has been in some of the professional organizations, and then just organizations in general. It's amazing when you ask people. Many times they are willing to share their experiences and donate their time. They just need to, you just have to ask and let people know that you need help. I think intrinsically as people, we respond when people say, I need help, especially if we have the ability to be able to help people professionally. I hope that answers the question in terms of mentoring. I think today, when I think about mentoring, because social media really wasn't a thing in the beginning of my career, but now there are lots of opportunities. So you have LinkedIn, which has a lot of opportunity to find mentors. Facebook, believe it or not, if you use it correctly, has if you can use it to help source mentors in your own work environment. There may be mentors, and if there's professional organizations you belong to, there could be mentors. Anything else on the new experiences? Then I'll move into calculated risks. And this picture, when I found it, I laughed out loud because, as you can see, this mouse is looking at this cheese, but also recognizes that if he gets caught, the trap is going to snag him. And so he's protecting his head. A lot of the moves that I made weren't necessarily in my wheelhouse, but they were calculated risks on purpose because I put together a plan. My goal was to be an executive before I turned 30. And so what that meant was I would likely have to move frequently, and be willing to work really hard and so that I could have these opportunities. And each of the roles that I took were intentional to build skills that I didn't have previously so that I could be in the right spot to be promoted. And it paid off, it worked. But it was always a very much a calculation of what's the risk and what's the anticipated reward. There were times when I said no and didn't take opportunities. Paradigm shift. And so with the paradigm shift, it is really important to take a step back, think about how you can, it goes back to that reframing. It's really easy from a self-talk perspective to push yourself into a place where you begin to doubt your own abilities and confidence. And sometimes you take a step back, take a deep breath, and look at the situation again and look at it differently. And many times in my career, I've had to do, I just did that this morning. I'm on this global project. I've got this global team, but the team is not all of them are fully dedicated to the project. Well, I don't have a large enough percentage of the people that are dedicated to the project. So I've escalated this, and basically the answer that came back was, we'll figure it out. So I did. So this morning, as I met with my team, we talked about it. I figured out specifically where we have those gaps. And the shift here is that I have a team, I think it's 50, 54, 55 people, and I'm probably 7 or 8 people short. So I'm going to go back out into my organization and offer these slots. I'm going to break them out separately so I can give some very specific mini projects and ask people to volunteer their time. And so that for me would be the paradigm shift. You spoke of tapping into your inner confidence. Sounds like you're generally a confident person. Any tips for people who are not generally confident? I am glad that it comes across that way, because I naturally confident is probably an overstatement. But self-sufficient is probably a better descriptor. And my tip to 2 things. First off, people respond to tone. So oftentimes I will be asking a question because I don't know the answer, but the way I ask the question, it makes people assume that it's not really a question and that I'm certain of what I'm saying. And so I've had to learn, first of all, either to adjust tone or tell people, no, I'm really asking you because I don't know. But then, so tone is a big part, tone and body language. If you look confident, it will project to other people. If you sound confident, it will project to other people. So practice the things that you need to say so that you become familiar with how you want to get your message across. The other one, and I said it earlier, and I'm so serious, fake it till you make it. If you sell yourself the story of, I am confident, I can do this, I am good at what I do, I am the expert, I am, and you also back that up with making sure you have the right skills to be the expert, you will make yourself believe these things and it will become true. The last one on this slide is around limitations and boundaries. You have to set your own boundaries and protect them fiercely. Companies many of them have, I would hope, good intentions around things like work-life fit, work-life blend, work-life balance. But if you continue to give, they'll continue to take. The other part is you got to know your own limitations. And so your limitations and what the company's limitations are. I say that I'm a rebel without a cause, and particularly when I think about the diversity and inclusion work that I do, I push boundaries. Now, I learned what the rules are and what we've written down, but I will toe the line and see if I can, how far I can push so that I understand the limits for the company, and then also for me that they understand where my limits and boundaries are. So those are some snippets about leaning into discomfort. Then the last one is you're the sum total of all your experiences. And by this, I mean, we often talk a lot about, certifications and degrees, but we don't pay attention to the things, the experiences that you've had on the job or in life. Those things make up the total package, and in many cases can be as useful or more useful than the things that you've learned. When I use accounting as an example, yeah, I learned a lot about accounting in a classroom, but accounting in a classroom and accounting in the workplace are not necessarily the same. One is very much about is theoretical, but then it's figuring out how to apply the theory. But in general, when we talk about experiences, it's not just certifications and degrees. It is life experience and experience in the roles. I am absolutely the only person that looks at me in my organization at my level. And so typically I'm not typically, I am always the only Black person. Um, it's a 50-50 chance, depending on what the topic is, that I'm the only woman, and I'm always the only American. That has been my experience, though, for nearly all of my career, particularly after I got beyond entry level. And it's amazing because these companies say things like, and I think it was the Wells Fargo CEO that said, "We can't find Black people. We just don't know where they are." And so it seems to be that we are often either the only one or one of a very small number, and usually aren't even in the same organizations. So it is daunting. What that does do, though, is it provides a natural platform. So, okay, I'm going to be the only Black person. I'm probably the only woman, and definitely the only American. So all eyes are on me. And so while that can be stressful, one of the things that I decided in early 2020, even before the George Floyd incident, I stopped code switching at work. And when there are things that I say that they don't understand, I tell people, you can Google it. So don't come and ask me first. Go Google it. And if you didn't understand what the Google explanation was, then we can talk about it. Or if you want to talk about the history of the word, then we can do that. And particularly for some of the things that I say that have Southern roots, or what I think would be Southern roots, they really get a kick out of it as they're trying to figure out how to translate. So a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about something, and I said, "That's all right, y'all gonna learn, because I can see you don't believe that fat meat is greasy." And I didn't even realize that that was very much a colloquial saying, but it is. But I made a decision that it takes too much energy to go to work and then code switch. So I don't. I refuse. And the other thing, that when I started working in this company, and I recognize it's a privilege in terms of where I fall in the work structure or the hierarchy, I had never worn braids until I started working for this company. And I made a decision that, take me as I am. Either you're comfortable with me fully as I am, or this isn't the right place. And it hasn't been an issue. What has been an issue, back when we were all still in the office place, of do not touch my hair. And so we have had many, many conversations around, I am not a puppy, do not pet me. I grab people's hand midair as I'm moving my head out of the way to prevent them from touching it, especially when it's not braided, but it's just out. It's like, this is not okay. It's an interesting experience. Sometimes it is very tiring, but I am who I am, and I've been able to be successful thus far without having to expend the energy on code switching. I will end today when we talk about continuous learning. And the first is around your definition of success. In today's world, particularly with social media, we are consuming a lot of people's stories, things that previously we wouldn't have known. I mean, you can see various celebrities' lives at the click of a finger. But the part that we have to remember is that what people choose to show on social media is the life that they have curated. And so it's important that you are very clear about what success looks like for you, both personally and professionally. My path is my path. It is the one that I've created. And it doesn't necessarily look like what other people would call success, but it is what I have chosen to define as success. Make sure that you're not comparing your behind the scenes to other people's highlight reel, because it's really, really easy to start looking at all the things that are going well for somebody else and not necessarily for you, because all you're seeing are the positive things that they post or share. And I think a couple of years ago, there was a saying going around on the social media platforms around, you don't be happy for people when they're in their winning season, because you don't know what they lost when it wasn't their season. And that's the same thing here. So definitely figure out what is your definition of success, and then set those goals towards success. The second one is around plans. You need to have a plan. And it's important to take into account what's your success definition, what are your goals, which should be small bite-sized pieces to help you achieve or attain the success. You have to also look at what are the things you do well, how do you leverage your natural gifts, talents, and abilities, and then where do you go and get some additional help from people, mentors, sponsors in your organization, or coaches, or your friends and family, because let's not underestimate your friends and family's ability to really help you as you figure out what it is that you're trying to attain. And then the last one is reinvention. Don't be afraid to go back to the drawing board and try it again. It is okay to try something and say, yep, that didn't work out the way I wanted to, or I want to do it a little bit differently, or I'm going to try it a different way. Reinvention is critical to innovation and success. And if you look at a lot of people that we would laud today as these very successful business people, they've reinvented who they are and how they approach things. And it's okay to move away from the crowd to something different. So I see a question, in my role, am I able to help get underrepresented people in my organization? Absolutely. There's even more of a platform since the George Floyd incident. So our company that last year changed its inclusion and diversity strategy, changed its definition of what diversity was, how we're measuring inclusion, what equity looks like. We're working on some very specific targets and actions, and then also sharing them with the broader internal organization to make us accountable. And then secondly, from how do we get more people at the table, it's going back to the businesses, because I think before people saw this as a nice to have, and from the top down, they've made it very clear that it is a must have. So it's been very satisfying to see this change. It started off as a very slow evolution, but I would say we're getting pretty close to the revolution stage. This work is harder because my company is not an American company. So many people outside of the US would love to believe that we don't have a race problem outside the US. That's a US thing. And so I calmly and quickly help them correct the notion that in fact, this is not just a United States problem, but it is a global problem. The thing that we do well in the US is that we talk about race, and we capture race. In many countries, they don't talk about race, or race doesn't always come to the surface. And in some countries, it's illegal to capture race. And so even having a baseline as a starting point is hard to achieve because you can't collect the data. This was actually my last slide. Is there anything I've seen from underrepresented candidates that I'd like to see less of? I think there's a couple of things. One, for when underrepresented candidates make it to the table to be interviewed, you are there. Do not make the assumption that you made it because you were Black or because you come from an underrepresented group. So you're Latina or you're a woman or LGBTQ plus. That should never be the assumption. You have to stand in the knowledge that you are there because you should be there, and because you could be the best candidate for the job. So come in confident. And secondly, in terms of what I want to see more of, one of the things that we tend to do is we'll see, for example, a job description, and there's 10 bullet points, and we only meet the criteria for 4 or 5 of them, and we don't apply. Stop. Most times job descriptions are aspirational. And there are some things that we know that if we get all of them, is a dream come true. But if we can only get 50, 60, 70%, we'd be okay with that too. So just because you don't meet all the bullet points in a job description doesn't mean you shouldn't apply. Apply for it. And if you make it through the interview or to the interview and it doesn't pan out, it could be that there's a different opportunity in that same organization for which you would be a good fit. I will stop the screen share. Are there any other questions?
So let me open my camera. And I'm going to thank you, JaKela.
Thank you.
Excellent presentation, great information. I'm going to go to our 3 questions. And guys, if I'm going to my 3 questions. If you have any additional questions or comments that you want me to give to JaKela, you need to give them to me before I start the 3rd question. You know how that goes. So I have the last word. No, you have the last word, but that question, that's it. Okay. So, all right. So here's our first question. So our mission at CDPD is to increase marginalized and BIPOC groups' access to employment opportunities and representation in the workforce by providing our members with free training, mentorship, and other resources. CDPD was created in response to record unemployment and underemployment rates stemming from the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. So my question to you, JaKela, is if you have ever been marginalized, and if so, could you share with us an experience or why you were marginalized or why you believe you were marginalized in a situation?
Sure. Yes, I have been marginalized and at multiple points in my career. But I think the example that I want to share with this group, I was in a role, and with this particular company, was not getting opportunity that I felt like I had deserved. And in particular, had done a lot of work on a project, got it to a point of it was ready to be implemented, and it was taken from me. And my white male counterpart, they said, we need you to do the knowledge transfer and give it to him. And it was a very visible project, and I had done a lot of work to get it ready for implementation. And first of all, it hurt my feelings, but then it made me mad because I knew how much I had put into it. And to have to sit down and explain to him, here's my thought processes, here are the things that I considered, here are the risks, here are the challenges. And so it was not going to be a quick knowledge transfer. And so the more I did that, by about the 3rd day, I decided, I'm not doing that. So I went to HR and said, listen, he can be on the team, but he can't lead the team. Because if I have to be the one that keeps telling him how to do this and what it is, that doesn't make sense. You need to help me understand why we chose him as opposed to me. And it came down to he had his sponsor lobbied for the opportunity for him. And I didn't have the right sponsor at that time. The compromise was I gave him the project, so he got to have the project, but I was promoted into a different role, a new role, because at the end they knew this, like, this is bad. The optics were off, and they knew they were. I think what I learned in that situation is, first of all, if you know that saying, if you see something, say something, that is real. If if you don't hold other people accountable, even though you're being held accountable, it has to be a two-way street.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So now that has a couple other questions come from that. For our members and then viewers who catch this on the internet that don't know what a sponsor is, can you tell us quickly what a sponsor is?
Coach, mentors, and sponsors. Those are three different things. Coach talks to you. A mentor talks with you. A sponsor talks about you.
All right now.
When you're talking to a coach, typically that is project related. They are giving you feedback. They may or may not be part of your organization. Typically, from a work perspective, a mentor is usually part of your organization. They are a layer or two from a hierarchy perspective above you, and can give you some very specific guidance, usually in your field, whatever it is that you do. A sponsor is as the person sitting in the room making the decisions and calling the shots. They are your sponsor because they're in rooms where you are not. And when they're making decisions about what projects or what jobs, what opportunities, they have the ability to influence and or make the decisions. And so your sponsor is not your mentor. Your coach may be your mentor, or vice versa, but a sponsor, that's a very specific relationship. Coaching and mentoring absolutely should be two-way. If you think about relationships like a bank account, you can withdraw only if you deposit it, and if you withdraw more than you deposited for too long and too much, they will close the account. And so think about your relationships with your coaches and mentors the same way. With sponsors, oftentimes they're so senior and so far removed from the lower levels of the organization. They're also looking for that feedback. They may not ask you directly, but to give them kind of perspective on, when you made that last reorg, this is what people were saying in the organization. Or if there are things swirling about, or things that that they kind of need to understand as they're taking next steps, that's where you can, again, create that two-way relationship with the sponsor.
So now this brings up something else for me now. So it sounds like I can find my mentor or coach. Does the sponsor find me? Can I find the sponsor, or do they find me?
Usually, so it depends on your organization. And yes, you can find your coach and mentor. And depending on what skill or what you're trying to get coached to do, that might be an external person that either you pay for or your organization pays for. It really depends. Coach is a very niche type of relationship. For the sponsor, many organizations have specific programs where they're trying to develop talent. And for people that they say, we think he or she has additional potential, they'll send the sponsor your way. The other thing that happens in organizations that are structured that way or not is that when you are really showing lots of hard work and demonstrating your value add, you may find someone who kind of takes you under his or her sleeve, and it's a relationship that is kind of organic in nature. You may not even know he or she is your sponsor, but so it's important to always put your best foot forward.
Mm-hmm. Yes, my first sponsor was someone who was watching me, watching my work, and I didn't know, and yeah, I didn't know at all. I was just doing my work. I love it. I love all of this. This is really great information, really helpful. So I asked the marginalization question. I ask it to everyone who comes on their first visit. Second time they come, I don't ask that question. So I asked the question, not so we can be like a woe is me or harp on it, right? But I ask it so that we can, if there's someone sitting in a situation right now, personally or professionally, right, feeling that they are being marginalized or they have been marginalized and it's affecting their confidence, that it's my hope that hearing successful people like yourself say, yeah, I was marginalized. However, in your case, I spoke up, I saw something, I said something, and out of that, I got a promotion, right? But it doesn't happen that way for everyone else, right? But yeah, I was in a situation where I was marginalized. But today, look at me now. I'm giving you this presentation as a successful entrepreneur or successful executive, whatever it is, so that our members can take strength from that. So the other quick question I'll ask you about what you said, if you can remember, if you can recall, was that situation before you stepped out into self-employment or after?
Before. That was before.
See,
That was
okay,
before.
yeah. So see that, guys, like even being in a situation where JaKela felt marginalized, and I believe she was, she still had it in her to say, you know what, I'm gonna try my hand at self-employment. So I love it. I love it. All right. So my next question is my favorite question. Everyone knows that's my favorite question. If you can go back in time, knowing everything you know now, everything you've learned since you left college, since you left Howard, and you can tap yourself on the shoulder at any point, maybe it would be as a freshman, at any point, what would you go? What advice? What would you tell a younger JaKela?
You were good enough. You are good enough. So take that risk, try that new adventure, take that new job, do that thing that everybody said was crazy. You are good enough. We spend so much time doubting ourselves and our abilities, and then that swirls and becomes that negative self-talk. We talk ourselves out of stuff that we shouldn't. And in hindsight, you look back and it's like, I should have done that, or I could have done it, especially when for job opportunities, you see who ends up in the job. It's like, for real, that's who. So you are good enough.
I love it. I love it. All right, guys. I don't see anything. I'm going to give you guys a benefit of doubt. I'm going to check my inbox really quickly in case somebody dropped something there. And then I'm going to go with my last question. If not, and then you'll see, like, I'm writing stuff down when you're talking. I don't think I told you this, because within our Facebook group, like, I love to hear all of our presenters talk. And when you guys are talking, you always just drop such great nuggets. So I write them down so that I can then post the quotes in our group. And so then I post those as quotes in the group. So I'll be doing that with some of the things that you said tonight. So I don't have anything else, but thank you guys for joining. Here is my last question, my final question. And thank you for giving us your time. I know you're terribly busy, and I know you have that super project that you're working on. I did a similar for an ERP system, but it was for 3 offices in Africa, trying to connect them to our US office. So it was not nearly as much. I mean, at tops, I had 550 employees between the 3 offices in Africa, So it was not what you were doing. 555 employees in 3 locations in about 7 business units. So not double digit and not high double digit business units. And I went crazy doing that project. Okay. So kudos. I know what that is.
Thank you.
Yes. So my final question is, you gave us such great information today. If a viewer could only have one takeaway from everything you said, what do you want us to walk away with today?
It's going back to you are good enough. I think that is the theme. You are good enough, and really protect your energy. Do not let people rope you into believing that you are not enough, that you're not good enough. And if there are things that you say, I want to be able to do better, okay, you're good enough to learn how to do them better. Invest in yourself.
All right. I love it. I love it. Thank you. Thank you, JaKela. I really appreciate you guys. I just met JaKela one day last week, and I posted about the fact that I was late for our meeting. I'll tell you this. So I had someone kind of blew off a meeting with me like the day before I blew off a meeting with you, or two days before. And I wasn't upset about it. I just really, because I know we're all going crazy right now with everything. And I said, I want to give people more grace, right? In every way, being really reflective about my actions. So I posted in the group, hey guys, if you're on a Zoom, how long do you wait? And the responses were interesting. And so then the next 2 days, I think that was a Thursday, Saturday, it was Saturday we were meeting, right? I forget about hours. And so I had to I had to go back into the group and say, hey, I blew off a meeting, and the person emailed me. I was 15 minutes late for a meeting. She had to jump back onto the Zoom. And what did somebody say? Like, oh, even players fall down one day sometimes. I'm like, yeah, I guess so. So thank you for showing.
Thank you.
I appreciate you, because I really, this was more than I expected. I just wanted to chat with you because you said something in a room, and I said, I need to connect with her in the Clubhouse room. And this was definitely more than I anticipated when we scheduled to meet. So I really appreciate you. You are now a friend of CDPD. You are welcome to come back anytime you want. Have a wonderful evening. I'm going to stop the broadcast. All right. End it. Me.